And Just Like That continues on because I'm still thinking about it. But in order to do this, I really did have to go back and do all of the research. I had to go way back, starting with season 2 all the way through season 6B or season 7 of Sex and the City and the first movie to come to several conclusions about whether Steve got his just desserts in And Just Like That, or did they change things, or was my read wrong? And I can be wrong. Hi, my name is Yolanda, and welcome to my channel. And Just Like That is over. Whew, calming to the soul. But I wanted to start a new series called And Just Like That versus Sex and the City. And to start it off with a video that I promised, my version of Justice for Steve. I was really harsh on Steve in my analysis of And Just Like That, and I got a few comments back, and I saw things all over the interweb, hashtag Justice for Steve. In this household, which is just me, Steve got what was coming to him. Now, caveat number 1, I hate cheaters. I hate cheating. No one deserves to be cheated on. No one deserves to be lied to. In that regard, Steve was disrespected by Miranda. But if we go back into the lore, Steve did it first. Does it make it right? No. I'm not one of those vengeful heifers. Just saying, when it comes to evaluating Steve and Miranda's relationship, their marriage, the score is even on that level. So I went back through all of the Sex and the City episodes to find out if I was wrong in my characterization of Steve. And I wrote down several questions. Have I been wrong about Steve? Is Steve the perennial nice guy? Is Steve the perennial good guy? And I was giving him short shrift. Did And Just Like That change the character of Steve so much that we did not recognize who he was and therefore could not be sympathetic towards him? I really never liked Steve from Miranda. Going back, my first impression of Steve was that I liked Steve, but in every subsequent episode, season, and the very first movie, I liked Steve less and less. So what I'm going to do is break down the timeline of all of what we saw from Steve from the original Sex and the City and movie number 1, and just leaving it flat. These are the facts now, as I see them, but this is what's part of the canon. Going through the timeline, we are first introduced to Steve in season 2, episode 8, The Man, the Myth, the Viagra. One of the seminal episodes of Sex and the City, and I'll talk more about how I got hooked on Sex and the City my first time around, but this is one of the great episodes of Sex and the City. Miranda is feeling extra salty, extra salty about men. I am a skeptic. Naturally, I distrust everything. I ask questions about everything. I have to guard against cynicism. So throwing all the men away is something that I have had to work on. I've had to work on as a human being. But in general, misandry, that's what you can call me. Misandry if you're nasty. I just, from what I've seen of the grown men in my circles, Steve does things that I like. I like Steve in the beginning. You know why? Because Steve tells Miranda that he likes her, makes her laugh, seems witty, seems engaged. They go home, they have the wonderful sex, and afterwards, he behaves like a gentleman. Steve is a nice guy. Steve is not toxic like almost every other man we've seen in Sex and the City. Steve deserves a chance, and a chance he got with Miranda. Now, Miranda has always been savage. Miranda Miranda has always been savage. Next to Sam, Miranda. Miranda with the lines. Scene stealer, you might not like her, but they were the facts according to her, okay? I've always aligned with Miranda. Of the four, I am a Miranda type. So going through the second half of the second season, where, in my humble opinion, is where I got hooked on Sex and the City, where Sex and the City got really, really good and really, really interesting, was with Miranda's struggle, right? I don't like Carrie. Asks her out. She rejects him out of hand. That is not my necessary choice. Listen, I'm an acquired taste. I know that I can be difficult. So everybody gets a shot. The cynicism comes out. She does not believe him. She doesn't trust him. And, from experience, she's been burned. She dismisses him out of hand. A whole bunch of other stuff happens in that episode, and we'll come back to this episode if there's enough interest. She has a moment where she's like, I believe, and she runs out in the rain, and she goes and grabs Steve up, and they kiss, and it's amazing. So that's the beginning of their relationship. And then it goes downhill from there. I wish that, there wouldn't have been a show if there wasn't a lot of conflict in their relationship. So we were going to have to cede that to, hey, we need the drama. The rest of the season is Miranda making various concessions to stroke Steve's ego. So from that very first, I'm forward, I like this woman, I want to get to know this woman, which I champion the positively aggressive dude who knows what he wants, knows what he likes, and goes after it respectfully. But from then on, Steve becomes a passive character. The beginning of their relationship is various concessions that Miranda made to be with Steve. What time of day they did the do. Steve is a bartender. He works late hours. What time of day they decide to do the do. Miranda has to make adjustments to accommodate Steve's schedule. Miranda is a lawyer. She works long hours. She works during the day. Steve is a bartender. He works at night and sleeps during the day. And he wanted to get it on first thing in the morning. Miranda, type A, neurotic, has to be up because bills needs to be paid. She just bought that new apartment in Manhattan. It cost her, okay? I'm a native New Yorker, I know. So, first concession. Miranda makes the first concession about when and how they meet. Second concession. Miranda lets Steve take her out, but only to places he can afford, and apparently he can afford a slice. Now, back in the day, those slices were $1.50 a piece in New York City. Adjust for inflation and everything else like that, $5, that's a $5 date. Is to Steve's budget, which is not a lot. We talk about money in the second season of Sex and the City and disparaging, and listen, Miranda's an apex predator as far as the capitalism is concerned. She makes the money. Steve does not. We are given further evidence that Steve is Poe, okay? And no tea, no shade to anyone who's poor. I've been poor. I'm less poor now. But I know the struggle is absolutely real. Steve lives in a hovel. Now, as someone who has been poor, you can make any space a fantastic home if you are motivated to do so. Steve lives in a hole in the wall, and it looks like literally someone just punched a whole bunch of holes in the wall in Steve's home. It's disorganized. It's a hovel. Comparatively speaking to where Miranda lives, he ain't got it. Now, part of being successful, part of making it in this world is 100% social. You have to be able to socialize in your given field to reach the top of your field. This is true of, especially if you are in the people services milieu. Being a lawyer is that you don't make anything, you don't manufacture anything. Your business is about people. What the partners are looking for in advancing partners is stability in relationships, They are looking at your partner to see what you are into. Steve needed to buy a suit for a social event, which is really a work event. It's where she's going to be evaluated. She offers to buy Steve a suit. Steve has an ugly gold corduroy suit. No. Steve needed to let Miranda buy him that suit, but he got in his feels about her buying him a suit. He refused to do it. He's not helping Miranda's career. We learned that Steve doesn't have any ambitions besides being a bartender, which is fine. I'm not a particularly ambitious person. Like, ambition isn't necessarily good partnership ability, but you do need to bring something else to the table. He won't let Miranda buy him that suit. He doesn't want Miranda to be his mother. There is a conflict there. Steve breaks up with Miranda. I always thought that Miranda just kept breaking up with Steve. Wrong. For the end of season 2, Steve breaks up with Miranda. Now, okay, moving on to season 3. Steve wants to define terms. Is he bringing anything to the table? No. But he wants to define terms. He wants them to be monogamous. Steve has always been awkward socially. This comes out in season 3. Steve wants Miranda to make space for him. Wants to move in with Miranda. Is he bringing what he needs to bring to this relationship? I never ever saw it. But Steve gets to move in. That's another concession that Miranda made. Out of the blue, season 3, episode 8, Steve in a Chinese restaurant says, we should have a baby, because he saw a baby and thought the baby was cute. And Miranda starts to realize she already has a baby. She's unsure, she's undecided. Get to a certain point in your 30s, because remember, original Sex and the City, all of the ladies were 35 and older. Looking for a man, looking for a match. Miranda ambivalent, feeling strongly both ways about having a baby and not having a baby. Does the analysis. We realize, and this is all on screen, that Steve is a kid and Miranda feels like she has to nag in order to get him to behave as an adult should. I was married to a Steve type, and there was a day when I realized I had 2 kids and I had only signed up and given birth for 1. Steve, being impulsive, says, let's give it a trial run, let's get a dog. They get a dog, and Miranda is stuck caretaking for that dog. Miranda still has that high-powered job. She is still working those ridiculous hours. Steve is still doing Steve things, and it ain't cutting it. Miranda's like, I'm out. I can't do a baby, a puppy, and another baby. I don't blame her. The end of the season, we realize women can't have it all. Sometimes it's an either-or situation. Miranda makes partner, but she has to leave Steve. Okay, season 4, life-changing event. Steve has cancer. Miranda saves Steve's life. Steve is a little nonchalant for someone who has cancer. A note on American healthcare. A note on American healthcare, right? Steve hasn't seen the right doctor, hasn't asked the right questions. Miranda, being the boss that she is on it. She gets Steve the evaluation and everything that he needs. Miranda saves Steve's life. Okay, so this happens in season 4, episode 9. Season 4, episode 11, Miranda is pregnant because, you know, they did the do. You can't go back to your exes without paying the price. Okay, Miranda is pregnant. Miranda has some choices to make. Miranda decides that she's going to keep the baby, and to quote directly, Miranda knew Steve wasn't right for her, but she wanted to do what was right for her baby. She's making choices based on, she's going to be a family woman now. Like, she can't just think about herself. She has another human being that she also has to take into consideration. Season 5, Brady's born. Miranda has decided that this is her baby. To catch everybody up, Steve had gone into business with Aiden. Aiden was the money behind that. Steve went into debt, and he admits he went into debt to open the bar. Aiden built that bar. Okay? The idea for the genesis of opening his own bar was something that he was prompted to do from Miranda. Steve went into debt to open up the bar. So, through Miranda and Aiden, Steve always needs help. The bar was born. Debt. Steve didn't have the capital to open that bar. Steve didn't save up to open that bar. Steve put that bar on the credit card. So, like, has the bar made the money back by the time they have this baby? No. Has the bar made the money back by the time they buy their house? No. Like, all of that money, okay, their whole life together was paid for, bankrolled by Miranda. Tell me I'm wrong. Down in the comments, keep it. Keep it civil. You can disagree. We can disagree here. But we can't get... Listen, dragged and deleted if you get out of pocket. Okay? Those are the rules. It's my chance. Steve's first instinct is to get rid of the bar. To pay for this baby. But he can't pay for the baby because the bar is already costing him money. Steve has never been the brightest bulb in the shed. Everybody's like, why did they make Steve doddering? Why did they make Steve awkward? Why did they make Steve a simp? I hate that term. If you are feeling positively towards a woman, let her know. Let her know. Like, we do not need the bravado in 2022, okay? It's hard out here without the games. Anyway, keeping it back on track. Keeping it back with Steve. Okay, Miranda's responsibility financially in this relationship has always been 100. Okay, now over the years, did that bar make the money back? We don't know. We're not clued into that. But Miranda, from the get-go, was doing it by herself. And the end of season 4, Miranda knew. Miranda knew. Steve wasn't right for her, but she had someone else to consider. She had to think of that baby. So we know this eventual pairing, this eventual coupling wasn't born out of a deep and abiding love. And by the way, you shouldn't marry for love. That's what I taught my daughter. Okay? That's an invention of the 21st century. That is an invention that we marry romantically and then deal with the details of living our lives later. We failed as women in our socialization to think that, like, marriage is built on love. If it works out for you that way, amazing. I am so happy for you. Most of the time it does not. There has to be a lot to go into that coupling. Okay, so episode 4, we're left. Miranda is having this baby. She's having this baby. She's doing it on her own. Steve is going to help in whatever capacity that he can. He very awkwardly, like, gets down on one knee, just because that's what we do when we knock someone up. We get down on one knee. Miranda's smarter than that. She's like, I'm going to take care of this baby. This is something that I want. Your involvement, Steve, is optional. Now, you shouldn't really give men that option because... So we're rolling into episode 5. This notion that men babysit their babies, their offsprings, that they're not 50-50 in this with their babies' mamas, irritates my soul. Men do not babysit their babies. They are parenting their babies. Okay, this whole, like, he's such a good man because he looks after the kids. And Steve couldn't even do that right. 2 hours in. Situationally, Miranda was supposed to have the weekend off. She made the arrangements. She was supposed to live the best life. They were invited to go on a private jet by Samantha's boyfriend. They were going to have a girls' weekend in Atlantic City, and Steve couldn't watch that baby for 2 hours without having a meltdown and saying that Miranda can't go. Yeah, I would have dropped him like the bad habit that he was right then and there. Can't do it. Now, Steve does have a mom. But Steve was useless. in that particular situation. And I don't think anything in the subsequent years, even though the years happened off screen, changed in that dynamic. Things got hard and Steve couldn't cope. Season 5, episode 8, they sleep together. Moving on to season 6, part 1, episode 1, Miranda falls for Steve. And she realizes it and she wants to tell him. She takes him out to dinner and then Steve announces that he's got a girl. Whenever Steve and Miranda are not together, Steve has hooked up with someone else. Introduce the Debbie episodes. Debbie's there for the entirety of season 6. Miranda's pining for Steve. In the meantime, Miranda, like, you know, she does the do while she's pregnant with Steve's baby. She goes on several unsuccessful dates. And then we get the Blair Underwood. Okay, she gets her swirl on with Blair Underwood. And Blair is successful. Has a high-powered type A go-getter job. Blair Underwood can afford an apartment in her building. Okay, he pays his bills. His credit is good. He treats her well. He cooks for her. Accepts the fact that she has an offspring. And what does Miranda do? Realizes she's still in love with Steve. Oh, in real life, would have had a nanny. They would have had a nanny, like, you know, 24-hour help in that home. It would have been glorious. Like, Miranda wouldn't have suffered. She would have been fine, okay? But, you know, the heart wants what the heart wants. Okay. No characterization on Steve. She runs back and she's like, Steve, I love you. And Steve is like, I've always loved you. And they are a couple again. Congratulations. We are moving into the second half, or season 7. I don't know how they justified what they did with the last season of Sex and the City, but we're moving on, right? First minute of that second half of season 6, 6B we're gonna call it, Steve and Miranda are having the conversation that they need to have. I do's versus I don't. And I thought this was a lovely, lovely way of deciding, hey, we're a couple. We're here. Okay, not my choice. But, like, listen, don't nobody want to watch TV with me on it. Oh, wait. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So, anyway, for those of you who are entertained, thank you. Please like, comment, subscribe. I live for the engagement. I do's versus I don'ts. And this is a conversation we all need to have in that pairing, what they wanted out of a relationship. And I think you do need to have that part of that conversation as well. But they did have a whole bunch of I don'ts, and they listed them out. Steve and Miranda are enjoying a beer outside. Lovely. They see an old couple that had just come out of the subway, and the woman is like laying into this man about you know, the directions that he did or did not give her on them meeting up. And Miranda's like, I don't want to be, like, Steve and Miranda are like, we don't want that. We don't want that. They worry about becoming that bickering couple because, and this is all canon, this is not my opinion, okay? This is what is in these episodes, that every time that there's a point of conflict, Miranda is the nag and Steve has the child aspect in that. And so they agree. Miranda's like, I don't want to become your mom. I don't want to become your mother. I don't want to be on you in the way that I have been on you. And Steve admits, I don't want to slack off like I used to. In this, Miranda has her light bulb moment and says, okay, now that we've agreed to terms, because she is a lawyer, right? Like, we know what we don't want. Will you marry me? Of course, Miranda is the aggressor in this, right? So all of the actions of their relationship, all the way up until this point, until they hitch, has been contingent on Miranda. So, like, Miranda says, will you marry me? She is the one who cements this relationship. She's the one who's always been in charge of this relationship. And on a side note, personally, I have learned, that I'm not the person to make the first move. I'm not, because of my personality, because of the dominance in my personality, work-wise, people-wise, I'm an awesome person to have around in an emergency. Once I take charge of something, then it becomes my responsibility. I no longer want to be responsible. I don't want to be responsible. I've done all of the parenting that I'm going to do as far as heavy lifting is concerned. Right now, I'm cruising. I'm here. I'm mom as consultant. I'm loving mom. Well, mom is pocketbook and mom is consultant, but that is the deal that we've made. My daughter is an adult. We have adult conversations. We've talked about roles and responsibilities, and I'm here for her financially and emotionally, but I am no longer in charge. No longer in charge of where she goes, when she goes, how she does things. No. Okay, invite me to graduation. Actually, I have to go visit my makeup in college because she has, and my wardrobe, and half of my wardrobe, because I can't say no. I have spoiled that child, but I think in the best possible way. Aside, I need my next partner, regardless of what shape, form, gender they come in. I need them to be decisive about what they want. I need them to choose me. I am not taking charge. I don't want to be responsible for anybody except for me, myself, and I, and my offspring. But that is a supporting role. I am the supporting actor. The best supporting actor in the film that is my daughter's life right now. I am loving that. And that is what we have agreed upon. To Steve and Miranda, they agreed to this. So moving up into the movie, Steve does Miranda dirty because they're not having sex. When Steve doesn't get what he wants, he goes and shacks up with someone else. This is a theme. I am a systems person. Listen, I'm riveted by bureaucracies, how things work. I'm that kind of nerd, okay? I see patterns everywhere. As an intuitive thinker, that is what I do. So Steve has always been Steve. Steve's the one character that they haven't done dirty. Steve has always been socially awkward. Steve has always been lazy, emotionally and physically, when it comes to the operations of this marriage. Steve stepped out on Miranda first. Miranda didn't do Steve dirty. She did him a turn not right. Okay, on the morality. And, you know, like, if you're into Dungeons and Dragons, leave a dragon down in the comments. But I always do morality alignments. If I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I'm chaotic good. But I do my best work when I am neutral. I'm not putting my supposition in here. These are the facts. These is canon, okay? Steve was always lazy. Steve was always inept. Steve was always socially awkward. Steve did not carry his load in this marriage. Not financially, not emotionally, and not physically, as far as the nuts and bolts of taking care of a child, cleaning up. Miranda has no fewer than 3 scenes in which she is doing all of the cleaning. Like, I see this in real life as well. Like, women clean, women cook still, women work. And what is, like, Steve was a roommate. Steve was an extra child, okay? Steve was a nice guy. Steve was a good guy and, you know, characterizing, but feminism has failed us. Just because we can do it all does not necessarily mean that we should do it all. And we didn't raise a generation of men to be partners. We did not do that. Still aren't doing it, if I'm perfectly honest. Like, still aren't doing it. To be partners, to be true partners, to be equals with their high-powered, high-steamed, go-get-it, intellectually curious partners. If you roll back to season, and I was like, girl, you in danger. When they went on that honeymoon, Miranda could not be alone with her new spouse. It was supposed to be romantic. And we'll deal with the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Steve's a nice guy. He's a good guy, but he's not a superhero. He wasn't the greatest. He wasn't the best. He did not try hard. Did not try hard. I see Steve a lot in pairings. I see Steve. I was married to a Steve. And when I got divorced, people were very, very surprised. And a lot of it was, oh, so-and-so is such a good guy. Just because Steve isn't the worst, and comparatively speaking to all of the toxic males in the Sex and the City canon, we saw a lot of trash there. We saw a ton of trash. Okay? Now, there's one or two good ones that got away. But we saw a lot of trash in Sex and the City. Okay? Toxic men, toxic male behavior. Okay? The ladies do not get a pass. The ladies do not get a pass on how they've reacted, but I think a lot of it is how women are socialized to behave in relationships versus character flaws. A lot of the men of Sex and the City, Big, number one, didn't like Big from the get-go. Didn't like Big even when he decided to settle down. Like, was the absolute worst of them all. And in the how horrible Big really was versus Steve, yeah, Steve seems like a knight in shining armor, but we have to stop giving these people passes. You do not get high marks. You do not get an A+. You are a great guy for showing up. All of those participation trophies went to the male species. Remember that? Remember when there was a huge cultural uproar? Let's get it over with. In the movies, Miranda's done. She's like, let's get it over with. We forget how savage Miranda could be. Listen, Miranda was the voice inside of our heads. We don't say those things out loud because, you know, you can die for less. Miranda on screen with the things that she said were the things that were going on inside of all of us at one point or another. Okay, yeah, so this nice guy trope, this good guy trope, it's not enough. It's not enough. Marriage takes a lot. Raising children takes a lot. And Steve never, ever carried his share. Okay, there's no justice for Steve is exactly what happened. One of the very few things that actually made sense about And Just Like That is that Miranda would leave Steve. Miranda would leave Steve because eventually it gets tired. It gets tired. You become exhausted of doing it all and being it all for everyone around you. And you look and you see this lump on the sofa that won't even take care of himself. Now, listen. Steve did not change. He was the one character that did not change in all of this because Steve didn't take care of himself. We go back to the cancer episode, and Steve, 20 years later, is still not taking care of himself when it comes to his diminishing hearing. Now, a lot of people got upset with how they made Steve deaf. Steve worked in a bar for 20-something odd years. Music, loud people. Hearing loss from someone who worked in a box that just made noise for 5 years. I suffered hearing loss and hearing damage from that. Who has lived with someone who had severe hearing loss and would not own up to it, would not wear their hearing aids. That behavior is very much in line with someone who is in denial about the sense of impairment and refuses to take care of themselves, be proactive about their disability. Miranda was tired, okay? And we're all tired. Imagine how exhausted we all are in real life, okay? When we have to be there, do all, still compete professionally, pay those bills, okay? Miranda's financially carried that entire family for the entire time, okay? Steve's project, his bar, which he wasn't particularly proactive about doing until he had lost Miranda and still needed a partner and still went into debt. in this fantastic world in which we had COVID roll through, Miranda's paycheck was, and Miranda's investments, and Miranda's house, okay, was always, all of that entire relationship was built on Miranda's shoulders. She got tired. She got tired. So her leaving Steve, and Steve being out in the cold to wither like he will without a partner, that's all right, because the Debbies of the world will, don't worry about Steve, okay? The Debbies of the world are always there for a man, especially if he's been wrong. I always listen to men. I listen to these men. Every once in a while, I get it in my head that I need to get partnered up again. And I go out on a few dates. Tell me about your ex. Go ahead and trash talk your ex. I know you're talking about your own trash. I know you're talking about your own trash. I pay attention to these things. Do we all? I wish we did. How a man talks about his ex will tell you about his trash behavior each and every time. Hopefully, well, I know 99% of y'all is women, so just amongst us girls here on the internet still talking about and just like that. Listen to those stories about the crazy ex, or the nagging ex, or the ex that controlled his life, and the ex that did this, and the ex that did that. You're going to find out a lot about a person, the way they talk about their ex and their past relationships. I keep a keen ear out for all of that. Go ahead and trash your ex. It's not doing what you think you're doing. Okay? If you have to make someone else look bad in order for you to look good, I'm noting it. But then again, that's why I'm single. So, and that scene, going back to that scene where Miranda confronts Steve, and she is so hurt that he went ahead and slipped and stuck his dick in someone else. And the hell that she gives him, it's all justified because she did change herself for him. She panicked. She got scared. She didn't want to die alone. She didn't want to die childless. Is that a reason to get married? No. So some of the responsibility, knowing that you are choosing wrong, knowing that you're choosing wrong and choosing wrong anyway, falls on her. But Steve bears some responsibility. He is not the nice guy. He's not the good guy in this situation. Just because you're not terrible doesn't make you good. And comparatively speaking, just because you are not the worst doesn't mean you are good. Never a good partner, never a good fit, never a good man for Miranda. Maybe for someone else who's like not so pressed. See, Steve needed to marry inherited money, not money that someone was working for, okay? That's who Steve needed to marry, or marry Debbie. But like Steve got his glow up and he rode that gravy train for 20 something odd years. Justice for Steve is exactly where we left him. I said what I said. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. I will be back with more comparing Sex and the City to And Just Like That.